Fantastic. I
Perfect.
can't see myself on this. That's okay. Well, just so I know if I'm looking at the camera or what. Yep. There you go. Perfect. All right, we good, Sid?
We're good. Kick us off.
All right, welcome. Good to see everyone. Happy to be back and excited for the draft next week. Certainly want to thank my personnel staff and the coaching staff for all their hard work. Um, Certainly all year round, but especially these last few months and weeks, we've been putting our final touches on the draft board and look forward to Thursday and hopefully adding some more talent to this roster. So with that, open it up and take some questions.
Let's go ahead and start with Pete. Go ahead, Pete.
Hey, Brett, curious about this draft in particular when it comes to offensive tackle, wide receiver, just casting a wide net, what you think of those two positions, and then where you think maybe the best value in this class would be.
Yeah, I think the draft in general has some positional depth. Although it is funny when we're looking at the numbers and the general consensus is this is a deep O line class or this is um, a deep D line class or what have you. It's not necessarily true for us, I think sometimes because like for the tackle position, I think once you get past like pick 35 or 40, most of those guys are gone. So if you're picking in the top 10, it's a great offensive line class. If you're picking in the top 15, it's a great offensive line class. If you're picking 32 and 64, you got a shot maybe here or there. So I think that goes into the additional work we put in and putting a strategy together and what guys might be worth a move depending on how it all plays out and what other positions are going to provide top end value if say an O lineman or receiver isn't there and do you go corner, do you go defensive line? I think that there are some interesting pockets there. So I think the good thing is that like every year there's a lot of good players and it's just a matter of working on our board, our system, given the picks we have and the potential moves we can make.
We'll go next to Matt Derrick. Go ahead, Matt.
Hey, Brett. We haven't really got a chance to talk to you since the free agency period started.
Mhm.
So that was one of my two questions. But that one, what was kind of your take on just everything that you were able to get done, especially Chris and bringing so many of the guys back on defense and obviously the addition of Hollywood Brown too. And then I'll have a follow up.
Yeah, so going into the off season, a lot of work to do and always unique challenges depending on the year and what your cap situation looks like. When we left Vegas and had a chance to get together before the combine, we were just kind of outlining some different ideas and some thought processes. And one of the things that I think was glaring to us was we were potentially looking at losing most, if not all, of our defensive line. Mike Dana, Chris Jones, Turk Wharton, Derek Nottie. So obviously a huge amount of concern there, especially given how well our defense played last year. I mean, it was one of the top units in the NFL. Those guys have all played together in the system for a long time. So Chris, right out of the gate, was our priority. Wanted to make sure we got him done. And then I think there was a little domino effect there. Had to move with LJ and we were able to bring Mike Dana back. But I think being able to secure that front with Dana, Turk, Noddy, and Jones was really important to us. Bringing back Drew, Tranquil was important to us. So really focused on retaining as much of that defense from last year as we could. And then like every year, whether it be free agency in the draft, if there's an opportunity to add a playmaker for Pat, we're always going to be looking for those options and played it out, so to speak, in some other positions. And I think we were lucky that, Hollywood situation played out the way he did and think he's going to be a great one-year addition for us. And he's going to set himself up nicely moving forward. So I think we're excited. And, it's like I said, every year is different and unique. And I think with the resources we had available, we maximized what we can do this offseason.
You mentioned like the offensive line in particular and the depth in this draft. This organization's made a move before from 27 to 10 to get a quarterback. Could you ever envision yourself going to 32 to top 15, top 10 for a non-quarterback position?
I mean, I can envision myself. I mean, got to get the owner's approval on that, but no, I think it's it changes every year, and I think we have a pretty good plan this upcoming week. But yeah, I think, listen, every situation is unique. I mean, we've had conversations in the last few years about guys that we consider top 5, top 6 prospects if they were to fall into the teens moving up, and got Clark and Andy involved, and they were all in it, and those situations just didn't work out. So I think that I certainly could see something like that. A lot of things have to fall in place though for that to happen. So it'd have to be probably a specific guy or two, and then probably getting into a landing spot that's not expected. And then if he does get to that landing spot that's not expected, the team is willing to work with you on a trade that makes sense. So certainly can see it. A lot of things have to happen and fall in place for that to you know to see an outcome like that. But I always think anything's possible.
We'll go next to Sam McDowell.
Hey, Brett. Couple of things for you. Just wondering, without asking you to reveal your draft board, just what you think overall of the wide receiver class.
I think it's one of the deeper classes. I think the good thing about the wide receiver position, this is typically every year, is they provide depth really 1 through 5, and there's always pockets of players. I think there's a large group of receivers in the first 50 picks, I think, that we have great grades on. And then I think there's another pocket right behind that. I think that is a positive. I think, corner, there's some depth, middle to later on in the draft. O-lineman, as I mentioned in the opener, it's really good early. And so there'll be a late run on those guys, but it tails off a little bit. I think it's a better defensive line class than we've seen in the past. I think there's some good mid-round depth there. Linebacker, running backs probably a little lighter than years past. So I think O-line, receivers, corners are good hot spots throughout the draft, and that's a good thing because we can use one of each of those.
And then, just based on how last year unfolded, particularly the back end of the draft, I know there were at least a couple teams that weren't excited to deal with you. What's this last week like as far as setting up the potential if there are guys that maybe you would want to trade up for as the draft unfolds?
Well, we'll see. Typically, the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, right before the draft is when the teams do all their call checks, make sure the phone numbers are working for the teams. So we'll get an email list of draft day phone numbers. So we typically do a run through and check with all the teams, and once we do that, it usually kind of spins into just some casual dialogue, hypothetically, and if you were looking to move up or move back, those type of scenarios. So I think we'll do a good job of getting out in front of this and talking to some teams and seeing where their mind is in regards to value of or their boards, or what boards they're working on. A large part of this is just making sure we're all on the same page in regards to what draft boards you're working from, because as you know, Sam, there's tons of boards. Each team has their own boards, and in a combination of other teams' boards with historical boards they use. So we typically reach out to those teams early in the week, make sure the phones are working, and exchange some ideas, and usually just make sure we're all on the same page in regards to what boards we're working off of.
Okay, we'll go next to Sarin Petro.
And I'll have a follow-up, Sydney, if I could. Brett, in light of what's going on with Rashee Rice, does that make you have to, put some guys like a Tavondre Sweat, who got a DWI in the last week or so? Do you have to push those guys off your board more now because of what you're dealing with currently?
Yeah, I mean, we spend a great deal of time on all these players, and I think we have to look at each individual case independently and just work through it. And I think maybe subconsciously, maybe it factors a little, but I think that when we stick to our process and trust the guys that we have around us, when we have a great coaching staff, we have a great personnel staff, we have a great security team. So we really lean on those guys. And, at the end of the day, I trust the people around me, and, they spend a lot of time working on the player and his ability to come in here and be a good person, be a good teammate. And so I think we try to stick to, what we've done in the past. And I mean, there'll always be some things that factor into ultimately what we decide to do with a guy. But I think sticking to our process, and we've done this now for, a little bit here, and over the long run, it's provided us a good blueprint to work off of.
And then kind of a follow up to what Sam had. Since you won the championship, do you find yourself like there aren't as many trade partners? Teams actively don't want to deal with you because they're afraid that they'll be helping the champ?
I think yes and no. I think that if a team, if it can benefit them, I think they're always going to pick up the phone and call and be willing to work. I don't think a team is going to, diminish their ability to do something they really want to do just because it's the Chiefs. I do think, though, that the ability to deal with certain teams, I mean, it's always been understood that if you're going to deal with a team in your division, there's a little bit more of a premium. But I think just some of the AFC teams in general that are consistent playoff performers, I mean, the Buffaloes and the Cincinnatis and the Baltimores, I mean, it's probably a little bit harder to deal with those teams. And even if they do pick up the phone, I think some of their asking prices are a tick higher. So I think we get hit with a little bit more interest, but I think that there's always a way to make a deal. But I think certain teams will probably up the price up a little bit.
We'll go ahead and wrap up with the last 5 hands that are up. So Blair, you're next.
Hey, Brett, I think you just touched on this a second ago, and I think we ask you this every year, but the value of the visit, whether it's at the combine or a pro day or whatever, what kind of information do you glean from that, and how helpful can it be?
Oh, it's extremely helpful. And I mean, when the guys come in here for the visit, I mean, they're here all day. I mean, they'll start in the training room. They'll go through another comprehensive MRI and meeting with Rick. And then from there, I mean, they get a chance to visit with all of our coaches. And at the combine, we do have a chance to spend some time with these kids, but I mean, it's maxed out at like 15 to 17 minutes. So you get a chance to get a brief intro, a little bit of an idea of their background, and you get into some football, but it's not very long. So I think just having the whole day and getting to know the person, understand the person more, talk through things, talk through football, talk through their upbringing, all that kind of stuff is extremely important to us. And typically we go through our system, and guys, we either feel one way or the other, and guys that we're not interested in is one category, and then guys that we feel really good about, we know this guy, it's not going to do us any good. We don't deal with those guys. But then you have a handful of guys that you don't, when you're at the combine, you felt like that 15 minutes just wasn't enough and you wanted some more information. And then there's another series of guys you bring in that didn't get invited to the combine. So you kind of like them to some degree, but you have no medical on them whatsoever. So those guys have to come in because there's just no medical on them. So it's a combination of different combinations of reasons of why we bring guys in, but they're super beneficial for us.
Let's go next to Jesse.
Hey, Sid, I'll have a follow-up too. Hey, Brett, I just wanted, with Rashid's kind of unknown status right now, how, if at all, does that change or affect your guys' draft and who you might take?
Yeah, I don't know if it does, just because I think we have a lot of needs. And I think it's one of those things that, you go into every draft. I mean, you can look at our roster, and I think short of quarterback, maybe linebacker. But I think that there's needs on the offensive line for sure. I mean, guard center depth, competition at left tackle, receiver, there's a need. Cornerback, we just lost Snead. We do have some good young guys. We do have Najee Johnson coming back. But the corners are hard to find. We could probably throw safety in there too, because I think we really like Shamari Connor and Cook and Reed. So, look, I think that it's one of those scenarios where I think there's a lot of positions that would make sense for us. And again, you start at the O-line, D-line, and receiver position, but it's a long season, and, depth is super important to us. And also, guys' contracts do run out. And, I think anytime you get a player that you think can come in here and challenge for a starting position right away, I think you go in that direction.
Yeah, you kind of led me to this one. Situations change every year. A couple of years ago, you guys had lots of draft capital, go up and get Trent McDuffie. How likely do you think a trade up is this year, just given your overall depth and the draft capital that you have?
Yeah, it's just kind of, weighing the options. And on one end, there's probably I think there's 16, 18 guys this year that we have as first round grades. You factor in some quarterbacks there. So, and then some maybe some teams that go in different directions that are contradictory to what our board has. So you figure 16 to 18 names, 4 quarterbacks, maybe 5 quarterbacks. I mean, there could be a window there where we have an opportunity to get a guy, and then it's just weighing, the cost, because if it is a corner or an O lineman or, receiver, we're probably going to give up the opportunity to draft that other position later in the draft. So is, one guy that you have a first round grade on better than 2 guys that you maybe have second, third round grades on? It's just kind of weighing that formula for us. And, I think that's where it comes down to just, the value of that guy that falls. And if he's one of those guys that you really have as a top 10, top 12 pick, I think you up and do it, like Trent McDuffie's situation. I think if it's one of those guys, I think we'll certainly be aggressive, and hopefully we can find a trading partner. But I also think there's some depth in round 2 there. So, I do think there's opportunities to add players that come in and push for starting positions in rounds 2 and 3 as well.
Let's go next to Nick Jacobs.
And Sydney, I'll have a quick follow-up. Brett, for you, rough estimate wise, do you know how many guys you have on your board?
I wrote that down. I knew someone was going to ask me that, because I never know. I just see a bunch of names up there.
Right.
I don't like count them. I sort of just move them around, and I have them in like pockets. And but I was walking in here, I said, someone's going to ask me exactly how many guys I have on the board. So it's 221, which is a lot, but you'd have to come in here and be with me one day to see how I process this, because like I have guys in the 6th or 7th round on my board, but I always know that we'll never get to the 6th and 7th round. So the total number of total number of players on the board is 221. But in my mind, there's kind of like a line right there, and those guys in 6 and 7 we keep on the board, because that's where I want to work down on free agency. And so I know where I'm going. As soon as the draft's over, the guys that we had on the board at 6 and 7, again, we'll have plenty of numbers. We'll never get to them, but that's my free agency board, and that's kind of how we work through that.
And then my last question for you, each draft is unique, has a unique characteristic to it. Like 83 having the 5 quarterbacks in the first round. I know a couple of years ago, you thought there'd be a 1,000-yard rusher in the 7th round. For this draft class, what do you think it's gonna be remembered for down the road?
Well, gosh, that's a good question. I'm not sure what it will be remembered for. I think it, obviously it'll depend on how these, where these players go and how successful they are, and what teams strategize to do different things. One interesting perspective that I did find kind of going through this is just the NIL effect. So, typically when you're working through the 4th, 5th, 6th round, there's always interesting prospects and small school guys, and but I think it's what you're starting to see is these 4th, 5th, 6th round prospects are a little older, because they're staying, and some of these underclassmen that get 3rd, 4th round grades, they have the opportunity to stay in school. And so I don't know if these drafts, and this will be a trend, where they won't be as deep as they used to be. So, I mean, if you're a junior and you have a 3rd or 4th round grade, and you have an opportunity to stay in school and make money, you're going to go back, potentially stay in school. And so what happens is I think the drop off from rounds 3, the cutoff line, I think that availability of young guys with potential that came out early, maybe they would have stayed, they would have been a 1st or 2nd round pick. Well, those guys are staying now. So I think the drop-off numbers are a little bit more extreme this year, and the players are a little bit older. So we have to work a little bit harder to find some young guys with upside that we really like. That, to me, I found challenging. And when we were going through the board, it was one of the things that I kind of like just instinctively thought. And then when I checked with our guys, they were like, yeah, these guys are a lot older. And but again, when you have a ton of underclassmen that put their name in, decide to come out, that makes every draft deeper. When guys are staying in, it's going to make every draft a little tougher to work with on the back end.
Let's go to Adam Teicher.
Hey, good morning, Brett.
Hey, Adam, how you doing?
Good. Hey, Dorsey would be appalled at you for having 221 names on your board.
Yeah, too many.
Yeah.
Well,
I got a
we don't use them all. We just have them up there just for our free agency.
All right. I just wanted to get your expectations on a couple of guys for this upcoming season. Sky Moore and Kadarius Toney. What are your expectations for those guys for this year? And Sid, I'll have a second question as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, we obviously hoping both continue to improve, progress, and are able to be consistent playmakers for us. And I know Kadarius has obviously had a long history of injury issues, but I mean, he is probably our most talented wideout. Now again, it doesn't do anyone any good unless you stay healthy. But I mean, the kid has always worked hard here for us, and I know he's been down there with Pat, and I think it's just a matter of him staying healthy. And I think if he can do that, he can really do a lot of great things in this offense. And that's one of the things that there's a lot of speculation about KT, but I don't think that we ever stop believing in him. And I think people around the building like him, and it's the injury bug, and hopefully he gets some luck on his side and he can stay healthy and be the player that he was in Florida and the player that we've seen in spurts here. So just hoping he has a good offseason and has a little luck on his side and can stay healthy. And with Sky's always been, mentally tough kid. And, he's still, he had that knee injury last year too. So, to some degree, just these guys being on the field, staying healthy, and then, making plays when their number's called. And the great thing about both these guys are the two guys I really like as people, and they're smart guys and they work hard. Now it's just a matter of them putting themselves in position to earn consistent playing time and then make plays when their number's called.
Okay. And a similar question on Wanya Morris, just what you thought of him when he had to go in and play last year for those 4 or 5 games, and what is his readiness maybe to be an every down starting left tackle if that's what you need him to be this year?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. So I think we were really happy with Wanya's development last year, and I think he showed some signs early on in the OTAs that we were really excited about. Continue that growth and maturation process during the training camp. And then middle of the season there, he got an opportunity, some good, some bad. I think Wanya would tell you this. I think if you look at his body of work last year, I think on one end, you're happy that he was able to come in at the pro level and be competitive. It wasn't perfect, but it also was solid play that I think is a good foundation to build and grow on. But he has to come in here with the mindset that, we're going to look to bring in competition, and, he's got to come in here and win that position. And I think it's his job to come in and be prepared to win that position. And I think it's our job to go out there and find competition, for that left tackle spot. So, I think that there's a lot of promise in there and there's a lot of ability. But certainly I think, it's our job to bring in some competition there and make him earn that and work for that.
And we'll go last to Nate Taylor.
Brett, on the left tackle situation, how much do you prefer, or I guess as the organization, how much do you all prefer position flexibility, having a left tackle who could potentially play right tackle if necessary? And given it's a premium position, I guess how important is it to sort of find that next guy that can obviously play that position for multiple years, given you had left tackles of different guys over the last couple of years?
Yeah, we put a lot of stock in flexibility. As you mentioned, Nate, you even saw that last game of the year when we played the O-line. Coach had those guys playing different positions. Creed played guard, and the tackles swap positions and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, that just it kind of illustrates exactly what we think of positional flex. And in game situations, you never know if it's going to be a right guard, a left guard, a center, a right or left tackle that goes down. So position flexibility does heavily weigh into it. There's a lot of guys or a lot of O-line coaches would tell you if you can play tackle, you can potentially play any position across the board. So I think that's why tackle is so premium. You have to protect the quarterback's edge and the blind side, but also typically those tackles are athletic enough to slide inside and sometimes even play center. We saw that with Mitch Morris a few years ago. He was a tackle in college and he ended up being a really good center. So position flexibility is super important to us. And yeah, and it is a quarterback league, and you got to protect him and you got to get after him. And those tackle positions are always going to be important because they protect the most important player in your team. So if we get an opportunity to get one of those guys, for sure, I mean, it's always on your mind, just like DN and DT. So again, hopefully the numbers work out, and hopefully there's a window of opportunity for us. But I do think there's some really good players in rounds 2 and 3. So just need a little patience and a little luck, I guess.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Veach.
Yeah, you
That's
bet.
all good.
Thanks, guys.